Hello, everybody, and welcome to Week 9 predictions. In what was a pretty chaotic week of the NFL, I ended up going 9-7 on my predictions last week, which I will take. And let's see how we can do this week. But before going right into it, I want to quickly say subscribe if you are new, be greatly appreciated, and leave a like while you're at it as well. Plus, comment down below any upsets you have this week. So to start things, Thursday Night Football, the Houston Texans at 6-2 are making a trip over to New York as they play the Jets, who are 2-6 and 1.5-point favorites. Part of this is Stephon Diggs is out for the season with an ACL tear, and kind of just the media waiting for the Jets to finally get things clicking and finally start winning games again. But I still don't think either of those things are really important, or in the case of the Jets winning games again, going to happen. I have the Texans winning this one in part because even with Stephon Diggs being down, he was pretty much the receiver 3. They still have Tank Dell. They still have Nico Collins. Joe Mixon has been running wild this season, doing really well. And this is a Jets defense that has struggled against the run at times, as well as a Jets defense that has struggled against the air at times. The Texans are a very hot team. They got a good win against the Colts last week, and CJ Stroud had a great day. Meanwhile, the Jets are coming off of a loss against the New England Patriots. It's just a very weird. The Jets are in a very weird season. I don't expect much from them the rest of the way. I mean, they're 2-6 with some really bad losses, and even with this being a short week, I don't trust them enough for them to be able to pull this one off. So I do have the Texans winning. Next up, the 3-4 Dallas Cowboys making the trip over to the 5-3 Atlanta Falcons, and the Falcons are 2.5-point favorites. Dallas had a tough loss on Sunday Night Football the week prior to San Francisco, a game that they tried to claw their way back into, but just wasn't enough in the end. Atlanta avoided Tampa crawling back into that one. They got a good win in Tampa to sweep them and have a firm hold on that division. I have the Falcons winning this game. Listen, for as much as Dallas has been like a very good road team, they got their first road loss of the season last week in a game that they just still didn't play well. The Cowboys are not a good team this season. And it goes to show kind of how weird this NFL season is. But this was one of the things I said during the offseason that I expected, and that was Dallas to have a fall off here. It is happening, and Atlanta has gotten their pieces together. They have good chemistry over there. They're ready to win this division for the first time in a few years. And after beating Tampa, there's really no one else that can stop them besides themselves. So they just need to keep winning, and the Cowboys at home is a great opponent for that, to keep building this chemistry amongst the team and to keep riding the momentum. So I do have the Falcons. Next up, the Miami Dolphins at 2-5 make the trip over to Buffalo, who are 6-2 and 6-point favorites. Buffalo completely silenced Lumen Field last week. Like, typically the whole 12-man thing over there for Seattle is a big factor. It wasn't. From the jump, Buffalo dominated that game. Fantastic job against the ground. The pass, fantastic job in the ground game in total. Both their rush offense was really good and their run defense was fantastic, which is a big thing against Miami, who has started to become more committed to the ground, but still not enough for my liking. And then, of course, Josh Allen is always going to be Josh Allen. So I'm not. It's weird. Of course, I'm a Dolphin fan. I'm going to pick Miami to win this one just because of blind hope. And also, it would be the most Miami thing to do to walk into Buffalo and win this week after back-to-back crushing losses to both the Colts and the Cardinals. And it's hard to say kind of how I think Miami will win this, besides the fact that pure bullshit's going to happen. Listen, because again, Buffalo's ground defense, fantastic. So Miami's ground game is hopefully going to be able to break through for that. But if not, okay, then what's the pass game going to deal with it? And how's the pass game going to look against this Buffalo defense? And I just don't know. It's Tua's second game back. And again, I'm a Dolphin fan. I'm always going to have them to win. So, yeah. Next up, the Las Vegas Raiders at 2-6 are traveling over to Cincy, who are 3-5 and 7-point favorites. And Vegas, coming off of a tough loss against the Chiefs the previous week, Cincy a bad loss against the Eagles last week. Both teams are definitely not performing this season how they might have thought internally before the season. I definitely think Cincy had higher expectations than 3-5 by this point. And the Raiders realistically did not want to trade Devontae Adams, but the writing was on the wall by the time he got traded that this season for the Raiders was not going to do much, and it's going to probably keep not doing much. I mean, the Raiders defense is trying their hardest out there, but they just don't have an offense to compete, especially against a Cincy team whose offense is a really good offense, and their defense, while maybe not that strong, it can make the plays when needed to against a team like Las Vegas. So I do have the Bengals winning. I think they'll bounce back in a game that they do kind of have to win, as the schedule after this game for Cincy is not the easiest. So if they want to keep pace in the division, they need to take care of some of the easier ones, and this is one of those games. So I do have Cincy winning. The Los Angeles Chargers at 4-3 and 2-point favorites make the trip over to the Cleveland Browns, who are 2-6. Both teams had good wins the previous week. The Chargers with a win against the Saints in a game that maybe didn't go exactly how they planned, but they still got a 20-point win nonetheless in a game that their defense completely dominated. Meanwhile, Cleveland had that great upset victory over Baltimore last week, with Jameis Winston playing incredibly, and I would not be shocked if he continues his level of play because he is a good quarterback, and that's all really Cleveland has been missing the past few years. Meanwhile, the Chargers, again, their defense is really well. Still don't fully know what to expect out of that offense at times, as some games they have a great job running the ball, some games a great job passing the ball, and other games kind of just a mixture of the two where nothing's really quite going excellently, but they're both going well enough to win the game. And Cleveland, we've only seen one solid week from them, so I do have the Chargers winning this game. Though again, in Cleveland, only a 2-point spread for this one. I wouldn't be shocked if the Browns win, but it's gonna be close. It's gonna be a tight one. And I think I think what's going to come down to it is, can the Chargers run defense step up in this one? And I think they'll be able to. So I'm going to go with the Chargers. The New England Patriots at 2-6 make the trip out to Tennessee, who are 1-6 and 3.5-point favorites. I know Drake May is not playing in this one most likely, as he left the game against the Jets with a concussion, and I have not seen any updates on his status for this week, so I'm going to assume he is missing this game, which means Jacoby Brissett gets the start. And Brissett is solid. I mean, he came in on short notice against the Jets and got that great game-winning drive there. And New England is still a solid team. Rod Mayo called the team out, calling them soft, and then they instantly said, bet, and got a very nice win against the Jets in a game that they did not look soft in. They did just trade Josh Uche over to Kansas City, which wild team's still trading with the Chiefs, but whatever. Meanwhile, Tennessee is in full-on tank mode, basically. I'm shocked they're favorites in this game, just by the pure fact that Mason Rudolph is their quarterback, and their defense hasn't done a whole lot, and the offense hasn't done a whole lot, and the special teams has been getting demolished as well for the most part this season. So again, I do have the Patriots winning this game, and it should be an interesting game, though, because it could very well be like a 9-6 final. But I still just think New England is the better constructed roster, even with all the chaos that's happened over there, especially with how Tennessee has performed this season, well below expectations. So yeah, I do have the Patriots. Next up, the Washington Commanders at 6-2 and 3.5-point favorites make the trip over to the New York Giants. Washington, a insane win against the Browns the previous week. I mean, Hail Mary to win it. What better way to end the game than that? Of course, maybe just a blowout would help, but whatever. The Giants, a tough loss to the Steelers on Monday Night Football, and I said it in Power Rankings that win for the Commanders was exactly the kind of game they needed to win at this point in the season. They needed to win a game that was very gritty, not high scoring, and kind of just one that they escaped with the skin in their teeth, because they need to prove it to themselves and to everyone else that, hey, we can still win games if it's defensive focused and we're not scoring a lot. We don't need to be a high-flying offense to win games. Not to say that the Giants will do much about it, but it just goes to show the talent that Washington has. The Giants they've looked weird all season long, and that crazy red zone play did not help them when they had 5 linemen out wide and none of them blocked. So I do have the Commanders winning this game. It's just I was expecting so much more out of the Giants. And it seems like that I kind of had these two teams swapped in the offseason, where I was saying that, Washington, I don't fully know what to expect out of Jaden Daniels. He's probably not going to do the greatest in his first season because that's kind of just the nature of things. And the Giants will have this redemption kind of season, but nope, again, kind of swapped. But I do have the Commanders winning this one, and what's been a fantastic season so far for them. The New Orleans Saints at 2-6 and 7-point favorites make the trip over to Carolina, who are 1-7. The Saints are on a 6-game losing streak after starting the season incredibly, and in that game against the Chargers, Spencer Rattler was benched, and as of right now, I don't know if they're going to put him back in the starting role or keep it with Jake Haener. Either way, this is what I was expecting out of the Saints the entire season, was this very poor style of play that make you question that, like, what's going on inside that building. And I know they have dealt with injuries to Rashid Shaheed and Derek Carr, and that's been part of the reason behind their 6-game losing streak. But they look so much worse than just the fact that those two people are out. It is concerning how bad they look, at least in this past 6 weeks. But again, it's against Carolina, so you would think that Carolina, a team that has not really had a lot of success this season themselves, they had that one weird win. But besides that, I mean, Andy Dalton came in, didn't do a whole lot. Then, due to unfortunate events, Bryce Young had to play last week, and he played okay, I guess. But even before he got benched originally, he wasn't playing the greatest. With all that being said, I do have the Panthers to win. I am expecting Bryce Young to be the starter, but even if it is Andy Dalton, I like the choice either way, because this Saints team is just non-existent, basically. The defense is trying their best, but the offense is a no-show without Derek Carr or Rashid Shaheed. And for the past, 3 weeks now at this point, they've just had bad loss after bad loss after bad loss. And I don't think it'll be a bad loss per se, but the fact that this is even going to be a close game to begin with is going to be considered a loss for the Saints. But I do think they will actually also lose this game, so I do have the Panthers finishing this off. Next up, what honestly could have been a game of the week scenario, but due to a game we'll be talking about a little bit later, is not. The Denver Broncos, who are 5-3, travel to Baltimore, who are also 5-3 and 9-point favorites. That 9-point spread seems a little crazy to me, but at the same time, the Broncos defense didn't play the greatest against Carolina. Again, Bryce Young had himself a pretty decent day. But the main focal point is the fact that Broncos' run defense is trying their best. It's not the greatest, but at the same time, it can do well against some of these lower tier teams. But they're going against Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson this week. It's going to be a tough test for that defense, who, again, Sean Payton said it himself, did not play well against the Panthers. But again, the Ravens, coming off of a loss to the Cleveland, so you would think that Denver could try to find a way to figure out what Cleveland did to be able to get that edge over Baltimore. Well, you see, Baltimore's not a team to lose the same way twice. They're going to bounce back well. I do have the Ravens winning this game. Even with Bo Nix potentially having a good day through the air, it's going to be tough for them to win a shootout against Baltimore. So they're really going to need their defense to step up in this. I don't think it's going to. Because it's one thing to contain Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers offense. It's another thing to have to contain Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson running ability, and Lamar Jackson's passing ability. So I do have the Ravens having a good bounce back win in this one. Next up, the Chicago Bears at 4-3 make the trip over to the desert. The Arizona Cardinals, who are 4-4 and 1-point favorites. This being a 1-point spread makes total sense. I mean, both of these teams had very, very weird games the previous week. The Bears losing because of the Hail Mary. The Cardinals winning on the last-second field goal for back-to-back weeks. No one truly knows how these two teams are this season, besides the fact that they seem good. Cleveland's passing game was non-existent against Washington, but their run game was electrifying. And Arizona's run defense against Miami didn't really show up, but it was just more so the fact that Miami, for some reason, cannot be fully committed to the run when they need to and have the lead. The other thing is Carolina's pass defense wasn't the greatest. They stepped up when they needed to at the end. But again, for the most part, early on in that game, Miami was in firm control. Chicago was in pretty much firm control for a little bit of that game against Washington, but they were playing from behind for the most part. Yeah, they get the first touchdown of that game. And just overall, again, both teams, very tight games the previous week, very weird games the previous week. I do have Chicago walking into Arizona and getting the win. I think this is a prime game for a bounce back, and I do feel like that defense is going to step up, in part because it kind of feels like they need to, or at least Tyreek Stevenson needs to. if Chicago loses this game in part because of a poor pass defense, it's not going to look good. So I do think Chicago will have a good bounce back game. The Jacksonville Jaguars at 2-6 make the trip over to Philadelphia. They play the Eagles, who are 5-2 and 7.5 point favorites. The Jaguars had a tight loss against the Packers the previous week. Came down to a game-winning field goal, and Jaguars played well. They've been playing better so far this season, but just can't close out these games. Some dumb mistakes by Trevor Lawrence. He threw an interception last week, and just in general, can just need to be able to finish these games. The Eagles, a fantastic win against the Bengals, a game that it felt like they have needed. It was just the fact that if their offense finally looked like an elite offense, like it should have the entire season. And Jacksonville's defense is a prime example to repeat that performance. So I do have Philly winning this game. It's in Philadelphia. And again, Josh Jacobs had himself one hell of a day against Jacksonville last week. I think Saquon Barkley will be in good shape to do the same thing. Maybe he'll finally get a rushing touchdown this time in the red zone, because Jalen Hurts had three of his own the previous week thanks to the brotherly shove. And again, Jacksonville's defense is the main issue with this team, but even then, it's a main issue, but only just because the other issues just aren't that noticeable at the moment. Well, they're noticeable, but not in the sense of, damn, they're losing all these games by 20, 15. They're losing these tight games and just need the defense to step up. I don't think they'll be able to give me Philly. Now for the game of the week. The Detroit Lions at 6-1 and 3.5 point favorites make the trip to Green Bay. You are 6-2. This game is going to be fantastic and going to be a game to decide. It's going to be one of many games between NFC North foes that could decide the division this season. The Packers currently are saying that Jordan Love is day to day, and I'm going to assume that he's going to be playing just because I want both sides to be completely healthy. Jared Goff did not have a great day against Tennessee last week. I mean, he threw 12 for 15, but he only had 86 yards. But at the same time, he had 3 touchdowns. So, hell, fuck it. The specialist department. Both teams have good return man with Keyshawn Nixon and with Khalif Raymond. This game could easily come down to just who makes a big play on the special teams unit. This is an outdoors game, which is important to say because both Jared Goff and the Lions kicker, Jake Bates, drastically prefer to play indoors. But this is an environment that Jared Goff has went into before and gotten big-time wins in the past. So while he prefers playing indoors, he doesn't need to. The main thing I'm looking at is Jake Bates. Because again, I feel like this game could come down to who has the more reliable kicker and who has the more reliable special teams department. This is the third week for Brandon McManus in Green Bay. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of how he keeps up his level of play. He has back-to-back game-winning field goals from them. And Jake Bates, this is his first year in the NFL. This is his first NFL game being played outdoors, and it's in Lambeau Field. And it's going to come down to those two kickers. Can they remain pretty much perfect on the season? Jake Bates is perfect. Brandon McManus, I believe, is perfect. It's going to come down to who can remain playing some really solid football, especially. And I have a soft spot for Jake Bates. From the moment that man kicked that 64-yarder in the UFL, I was a fan. So I do have Detroit winning this game, but this is going to come down to the wire. It's just I have more faith in Jake Bates, and I have more faith in Detroit and Jake Bates and their special teams department than I do in the Packers kicking game because they have a rough history with that the past few years. So yeah, give me the Lions. Next up, the Los Angeles Rams at 3-4 and 2-point favorites make the trip out to Seattle, who are 4-4. The Rams, a massive win against the Vikings on Thursday Night Football. They looked light years better with the return of Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. And to be fair, that should not be a surprise. Those two receivers are massive parts of this offense. Kyron Williams had himself a great day as well against the Vikings defense. And I expect him to have another big game going against Seattle's run defense, who could not stop James Cook if he was a traffic cone or a deer in headlights. It was just a bad defensive game for Seattle. They're looking to bounce back, but at the same time, the Rams are riding a very hot hand with that win, with them being healthy. Again, going to Seattle, which normally is a massive thing, but after how Buffalo played last week, I don't know. But to be fair, the Rams don't travel the greatest, especially compared to Buffalo. Either way, I do have the Rams winning. I expect Kyron Williams to have a big day. I expect both Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua to have big days once again. And I expect Matthew Stafford to be that guy and be able to pull out a win for the Rams in this one. Sunday Night Football, the Indianapolis Colts at 4-4 make the trip to Minnesota, who are 5-2 and 5-point favorites. Minnesota, 2-game skid here, trying to break free from that as they fell to third place in the division after 2 weeks and 2 losses. The NFC North is a battleground, and this would be a big one for the Vikings to win, as dependent on the result of Lions-Packers, they could jump back into second place. And you would think that they have a pretty easy opponent. I mean, it's the Colts. The past 2 weeks, they haven't played the greatest, and kind of just a very weird team with Anthony Richardson back. Well, that's the thing. Joe Flacco was getting the start. That's going to be a very fun and interesting thing to see, as again, Anthony Richardson, rightfully so, being benched after tapping out and quitting on the Colts last week for a play or two. So I do like the decision by the Colts. I do think Joe Flacco was the better guy, and Anthony Richardson needs time to learn behind a guy like Joe Flacco. So while I do think this is both a part of, hey, that's unacceptable what you did last week, but it's also the case of, hey, you just aren't ready to be a full-time starter just yet. Sit down, don't worry, learn from Joe Flacco. Again, Minnesota, 2-game skid, looking to bounce back at home. I do have the Vikings winning. I expect them to bounce back. Aaron Jones, I'm expecting to have a pretty decent day because the Colts' run defense is not that great. I mean, Joe Mixon had over 100 yards in a day last week. I expect Aaron Jones to have probably around 75, 80 at the bare minimum. And I still expect their pass game to work well. So I do have the Vikings winning that one. Finally, to cap things off, Monday Night Football between the Buccaneers, who are 4-4, making the trip over to Kansas City, who are the only undefeated team left at 7-0 and 8.5-point favorites. The Chiefs are undefeated in purely part because of their defense. Their defense is playing incredibly, doing a great job there. And it's going to be an interesting matchup. For as much as their defense is playing incredibly well, they haven't necessarily played an opponent besides the Ravens in week 1 that had an offense to truly compete against that defense. And I would feel more confident in saying Tampa is going to win if Mike Evans and Chris Godwin were healthy. But I didn't expect Tampa's offense to play as well as they did last week against Atlanta, and in part because Kate Auden had himself one hell of a day. I do have the Buccaneers winning. The Chiefs need to lose at some point this season because that's just the nature of things. You're not going to be going perfect. Sorry to tell you that, Casey. It is very unlikely. So I do have Tampa winning this game. Monday Night Football. I think Tampa's defense is going to become ready to play as well. If this ends up being a defensive showdown, yeah, part of the cards go to Mahomes. But at the same time, this Tampa offense played incredibly well against an Atlanta defense without their top 2 receiving options. And KC's offense is very, they're at the point where they're starting to find that electricity with them. But I just don't think it's enough just yet. So I do have Tampa winning that game, but it should be interesting nonetheless. Thank you all for tuning in and watching. Really appreciate it. You can subscribe, like, the whole drill. See you all next time. Have yourselves a damn good one. Peace.